The Galactic Economic Council had existed for 12,000 years before humans ever left their small blue planet. The council members sat in their ancient chamber, surrounded by floating holographic displays that showed market data from across 1,000,000 star systems. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched civilizations burn through their resources and collapse into nothing. They believed they understood economics better than any species could possibly understand it. Then the humans arrived. Senior analyst Vorthax of the Kethrani species remembered the day clearly. His species had 4 arms and 3 eyes, and they had dominated galactic banking for 6,000 years. When the first human trade delegation walked into the council chamber, Vorthax had barely looked up from his calculations. Another primitive species wanting to join the galactic community. Another group of creatures who would take centuries to understand basic interstellar trade principles. The human delegation was led by a woman named Sarah Chun. She was small by galactic standards, with only 2 arms and 2 eyes. She carried a simple data tablet and wore plain clothing. Vorthax remembered thinking she looked completely unremarkable. That was his first mistake. Sarah Chun did not ask for loans. She did not request favorable trade agreements. She did not beg for technology transfers or economic assistance. Instead, she placed her data tablet on the council table and projected a simple proposal into the air. The humans wanted to establish something called a stock exchange. Vorthax had studied the concept briefly. It was a primitive system where ownership of companies could be bought and sold freely by anyone. The council had dismissed such systems thousands of years ago. They created instability. They allowed too much power to flow to individuals rather than governments. They were dangerous and unpredictable. The council voted to allow the humans their little experiment. They gave Earth permission to establish their exchange as a curiosity, nothing more. The ancient species of the galaxy watched with amusement as humans began trading pieces of paper that represented ownership of things. That was 27 years ago. Today, Vorthax stood before the council as the lead researcher on what had become known as the human economic crisis. Except it was not a crisis for humans. It was a crisis for everyone else. The holographic displays around the chamber no longer showed the steady, predictable markets that the galaxy had known for millennia. Instead, they showed chaos. Beautiful, terrifying, incomprehensible chaos. Human currency values flickered and changed thousands of times per second. Human companies appeared from nothing and grew to span entire star systems within months. Human traders moved money across the galaxy at speeds that the ancient banking systems simply could not match. Vorthax began his presentation with the most disturbing statistic. In 27 years, a single human generation, the human dollar had become the dominant currency in 63% of all galactic trade. The Kethrani credit, which had held that position for 6,000 years, now represented less than 12%. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Several species had already seen their economies collapse as human money flooded their systems. Others were desperately trying to adapt, but they were failing. The humans were simply too fast. Ambassador Krell of the Vorthan Collective demanded an explanation. His species had evolved for patience. They lived for thousands of years and made decisions slowly and carefully. They had never understood why humans seemed to rush through everything. Now their economy was being eaten alive by human investment firms. Vorthax pulled up his analysis. The first factor, he explained, was human lifespan. Humans lived for approximately 80 years. By galactic standards, this was nothing. Most council species lived for centuries or even millennia. This short lifespan had always been seen as a weakness. It was actually their greatest strength. Because humans lived such short lives, they thought in terms of years and decades rather than centuries. They made decisions quickly. They took risks that longer-lived species would never consider. A Kethrani banker might spend 50 years analyzing an investment opportunity before committing funds. A human trader would make the same decision in 50 seconds. At first, this seemed reckless, but humans had developed sophisticated tools to manage their speed. They created algorithms that could analyze millions of data points instantly. They built trading systems that operated faster than any organic mind could process. They invented financial instruments so complex that even Vorthax, with his 3 eyes and 4,000 years of experience, could not fully understand them. The second factor was human psychology. Vorthax displayed brain scans comparing human neural activity to that of other galactic species. Humans had an unusual relationship with risk. Their brains actually produced pleasure chemicals when they gambled. They enjoyed uncertainty. They found stability boring. This was deeply strange to the Council species. Most galactic civilizations had evolved to avoid risk. They built stable systems and maintained them for thousands of years. Change was dangerous. Unpredictability was frightening. The goal of any sensible economy was to minimize surprises. Humans actively sought surprises. They called it innovation. Vorthax showed examples of human innovation that had disrupted galactic markets. A human company called Spacelink had developed a new communication protocol that made information transfer 40% faster. Within 3 years, they had captured 70% of the galactic communications market. The ancient Velthari communication networks, which had operated unchanged for 8,000 years, went bankrupt. A human financial firm called Nexus Capital had created something called cryptocurrency derivatives. Vorthax admitted that he still did not understand how they worked, but they had somehow allowed humans to move money without using traditional banking systems. The Kethrani banking networks were now losing customers by the millions. A human entertainment company called Stellar Dreams had developed immersive virtual reality experiences that were so compelling that beings across the galaxy became addicted to them. They paid subscription fees in human dollars. Trillions of dollars flowed to Earth every month just from beings wanting to escape into human-created fantasies. The third factor was the most troubling. Humans had a concept they called debt. Most galactic civilizations considered debt to be shameful. If you needed something, you saved until you could afford it. Borrowing was seen as a sign of failure. The ancient economies of the galaxy operated almost entirely on accumulated wealth. Humans had turned debt into a tool. They borrowed money to build things that did not yet exist. They created entire industries on the promise of future payment. They leveraged everything they had, and then they leveraged things they did not have. It was insane by galactic standards. It was also incredibly effective. Human debt had created a phenomenon that Vorthax called economic velocity. Money in human systems moved constantly. It flowed from hand to hand, from company to company, from planet to planet. Every time it moved, it created new opportunities. Every transaction generated new wealth. In traditional galactic economies, money sat still. Wealthy families accumulated resources over generations and held them securely. This created stability, but it also created stagnation. Nothing new could happen because all the resources were locked away. Human money never stopped moving. It was alive in a way that galactic economists had never seen before. Council member Yethrix of the Solarian Collective raised the obvious question. Could the other species simply adopt human economic practices? Could they start their own stock exchanges and debt systems and cryptocurrency derivatives? Vorthax had studied this possibility extensively. The answer was theoretically yes, but practically no. Human economics worked because of human nature. The short lifespans that made them take risks. The brain chemistry that made them enjoy uncertainty. The cultural systems that allowed them to trust strangers with their money. These were not things that could be easily replicated. The Kethrani had tried to create their own stock exchange. It had failed within 2 years. Kethrani investors were too cautious. They analyzed opportunities for so long that the opportunities disappeared. When they did invest, they held their positions for decades, refusing to sell even when losses became obvious. The market simply did not have enough activity to function. The Vorthen had attempted to introduce debt financing to their economy. It had caused a cultural crisis. Vorthen families had been built on the principle of self-sufficiency for 60,000 years. The shame of owing money to others had driven several prominent Vorthen to take their own lives. The experiment was abandoned. The Solarians had created their own cryptocurrency, but their collective consciousness made individual economic decisions almost impossible. Every transaction required consensus from millions of minds. By the time they agreed on a purchase, the opportunity had passed. Human economics required human minds. And there were now 30 billion humans spread across the galaxy, all of them thinking in that strange, fast, risky way that no other species could match. Vorthax presented his final projection. Within another generation, approximately 30 years, human currency would likely dominate 90% of all galactic trade. Human companies would control the majority of galactic resources. Human financial systems would become the only systems that mattered. This was not conquest. Humans had not fired a single weapon. They had not threatened anyone. They had simply traded. They had invested. They had innovated. And in doing so, they had changed everything. The council sat in silence as Vorthax finished his presentation. They were the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They had shaped civilizations for millennia. They had believed themselves masters of the universe. They had been wrong. Sarah Chun was still alive. She was 73 years old now, and she ran the largest financial institution in galactic history. The woman who had once stood before this council with a simple data tablet now controlled more wealth than most species had accumulated in their entire existence. She had given an interview recently that Vorthax had watched with fascination and horror. A reporter had asked her about the human domination of galactic markets. Had it been planned? Had humans understood what they were doing when they introduced their economic systems to the galaxy? Sarah Chun had laughed. Of course not, she said. Humans never planned anything that far ahead. They just saw opportunities and took them. They moved fast and learned from their mistakes. They did not worry about what would happen in 1,000 years. They worried about what would happen next quarter. That was the human secret. They did not try to control the future. They simply moved so quickly that by the time anyone else reacted, the future had already changed. Vorthax ended his report with a recommendation. The council needed to adapt. They needed to find ways to work with human economic systems rather than against them. They needed to accept that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The council members did not want to accept this. They argued and debated and proposed alternatives. But Vorthax knew they were wasting their time. They were thinking in terms of decades and centuries. The humans were thinking in terms of days and hours. By the time the council made a decision, the humans would have already changed the game again. Somewhere across the galaxy, a young human was probably starting a new company right now. They had probably borrowed money. They did not have to build something that did not yet exist. They were probably taking risks that would make any sensible being's blood run cold. And they were probably going to change everything, again, before anyone could stop them. That was simply what humans did. They did not wait. They did not hesitate. They did not seek permission. They just moved forward, faster than anyone had ever thought possible. The galaxy was learning to keep up.